They're just great, and we received a lot of mail, and that's the reason why they're back. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sanderlings.
So, VK on the beat, check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1710 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Yes, we are open. An award-winning podcast from Monaris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego. Toronto Maple Leafs baseball, the best baseball in the city outside the Dome. Get to Christie Pitts this summer. Check out a game. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto's Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iones, sponsored by Fusion Corp Construction Management Inc. and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, returning to Toronto Mic'd for his exit interview as he retires from the CBC after 44 years. That must be a typo. It's Tom Harrington.
Michael, how are you doing?
Good. Welcome back, Tom.
Very nice to be back. It's interesting to be in your basement rather than the backyard.
Right. You came over in August 2021. There's a brief period of time when I wasn't allowed to have guests in my basement. This is the COVID pandemic. Do you remember the COVID pandemic?
Oh, yeah, I heard about it. Mm-hmm.
You have some memories of that. Okay. So right off the top, before we get into it, It's great to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I'm going to read the description. So if people want the A to Z, so we covered everything. Like people are like, I need more, I don't know, reach for the top talk or something like that. Okay.
Really haven't had enough of that? Okay.
Go to episode 896 of Toronto Mic'd. And here's the description I wrote. Mike chats with CBC's Tom Harrington about singing on the Tommy Hunter show. Remind me to get back to that, though, because I played that Sanderlings off the top there. Being on Reach for the Top, joining the CBC as a sports journalist, switching to news, appearing on Marketplace and The World This Hour, and the state of news in this country. That episode was about 90 minutes. We talked about everything. August 2021 in the backyard. I apologize right now, Tom. I think the backyard is just a nicer vibe. Am I right?
It is kind of. Yeah, I have to admit it was kind of.
You want to move this show back there?
Sure. I got all the time in the world now.
All right, unplug. All right. So okay, where do I begin? Maybe first let's talk about the cold open. I played it off the top. I know people can go back to 896 and they will, but let's give them a bit of the greatest hits here. I'll tell you, Tom, that just a couple of weeks ago, I had over in this basement, I had Donna Ramsey Anderson. Do you know that name at all?
I do not.
So that's a country music legend who her and her husband, Leroy Anderson, would play on
Donna and Leroy.
Donna and Leroy.
Yeah, okay, that I know.
Okay, I got to build them by the brand here. So Donna and Leroy played on the Tommy Hunter show for years and years and years until Tommy Hunter hung up his mic there or whatever. But please remind us, those voices we heard at the beginning, the Sanderlings. Who were the Sanderlings, and what the heck would you, Tom Harrington, have to do with the Sanderlings?
So, Sanderlings is the eventual outcome of a musical group that my mother created in St. John's, Newfoundland in the 1960s, 1964, basically for a Christmas concert, I believe. So it was myself, I was the youngest, my two sisters, Beth and Denise, and four other kids. There were seven of us. We did some Christmas shows. People liked it in St. John's. And so we were the little carolers to begin with. Then we became the little singers because we started performing more beyond the Christmas season, again in St. John's only. We started performing on CBC television and CBC radio back then. So I was connected to CBC. I think the first time I was on CBC television was 1965. I would have been 7. I was 7 years old.
Wow.
So, and then the group kind of emerged and became more and more popular. We started getting gigs or requests to do bigger events. We did a show at the Arts and Culture Centre, which is the big theatre in St. John's, Newfoundland, seats about 1,100. We sold out. And at around 69, my father, my late father, who was a newspaper editor and a Newfoundland historian, came up with a name for the group, changing it to the Sanderlings, which is a little shorebird you'd see in Newfoundland on the beaches there. So that's how we became the Sanderlings. I was as I said, one of the 7 members of the group. It was a vocal group. We had a small group that played with us, a band that played with us. We were vocals, so we do like 3-part, 4-part vocals, that sort of thing. So we're people said, you're like the Osmond Brothers. No, not really. But we had costume changes, but let's put it this way. We got the Tommy Hunter show in 1970 because we were discovered by a producer who worked for that program. He brought us on in November of 1970, and it was such a hit. The show set a ratings record for the Tommy Hunter show.
Wow!
So they brought us back for the Christmas special that year and brought us back again the following spring for another show. So around 3 times in one season, which I think is kind of unusual. And we were the first group, I believe, from Newfoundland to ever appear on the program. And people who don't know, Tommy Hunter show was the biggest variety program on Canadian television at the time. It was on Friday nights. Everybody watched it. It was huge. So for us to be on there 3 times, and that summer of 71, we recorded an album, which had a couple of singles that charted in the top 10 in Canada. And then the group broke up in September of 71.
I searched, far and wide to find like a studio cut of a Sanderling song.
Right.
Do you have this in your personal collection?
I don't. I actually have. Okay, so what I have is
because I couldn't find anything.
I have the CD of the album, and I have the 45 of one of the singles we released in the summer of 71. And actually, if you do go on YouTube and look on, what's it called? Loving You is Just Like Walking Through the Sunshine. Sanderlings, you'll find you don't see us, but you hear the song being played over images of Newfoundland, actually, because that's where I'm from. I think it's called Loving You. It's called Loving You. It's Just Like Walking Through the Sunshine. I believe is the title of the.
Okay, we're gonna do this live, everybody.
Okay.
You don't often get.
Haven't they suffered enough
Tom
already?
Harrington.
Heavens, okay.
Listen, Loving You. Hold on here. Sanderlings. I Want You. No. I want. Okay. Sanderlings. I Want You. No. Loving You Like Loving the Wind? No, that is the Silvers.
I know it's on there.
So I did a pretty thorough
search. Okay,
search.
maybe it's not there anymore.
The reason I had such a short clip off the top is because I had to take it from like a CBC thing, and they had it in the background, but they only did a few seconds, and then some guy named Tom Harrington talked all over it and ruined my cut here. But I'm like, somewhere I've got to find some Sanderlings.
Yeah.
So I'm striking out here, to be very honest with you. But
I've got my phone. I can do a quick search, but we don't want to.
Okay. This is not the CBC. You're going to pick that up very quickly here. But let's not bury the lead. Let's address this off the top here. By the way, did you reach for the top?
Yeah, won the national championship.
So everybody, get your butts to episode 896 for the gory details.
In fact, if I can add, Mike, in last summer was the 50th anniversary of us winning the national championship. And the 4 of us, the 4 team members, are still alive and kicking. And we got together for a reunion here in Toronto in August of last year. So one of the guys lives in Cleveland, one lives in St. John's, and one lives in north end of Toronto. So we got together at my place, went for dinner, and spent the weekend together. It was fantastic.
That is fantastic. So not only do you have this golden voice, you're on the Tommy Hunter show. By the way, Tommy Hunter's still with us.
He is. And you know what he isn't, Mike? He isn't on the Canada's Walk of Fame. I've nominated him twice, and he's not there. It's ridiculous. They just announced the new nominees, not begrudging anybody else, but the fact that he is not, and that show alone introduced Canadians to Shania Twain and Gordon Lightfoot and many, many others.
And Tom Harrington.
Well, yeah. He should be on there. Anyway, I digress.
No, that's what you're here for. Where else can you just share something like that? So, yeah, that sounds like an oversight. We need to correct that. But you... Was it 44 years? I know you had your appearances earlier as a Sanderling, but professionally speaking, was it 44 years of service at the CBC?
Yeah, I started in Calgary in May '81. I was right out of journalism school from Western Ontario. I did the master's program in journalism there, which doesn't exist anymore. And in those days, they had a training program. It's a bit like a hockey draft. They would go to the journalism schools across the country, looking for a young reporter talent or whatever to be trained in Toronto for a couple of weeks and then sent to regional newsrooms for the summer. The idea being if they worked out, if they had some skill, if the opportunity was there, they would continue with the service. So I got picked for that program. Was brought to Toronto in May of '81 and trained for a couple of weeks. And then I was sent to Calgary the May long weekend that year, the Victoria Day weekend. And the rest were sent. One was sent to Ottawa. I think one stayed in Toronto. One went to Saskatoon, I think. I can't remember where everybody else went. But 2 days after I arrived in Calgary, NABET, the technicians union, went on strike for 4 months. So anybody who worked in a newsroom that relied heavily on what they call ENG, electronic news gathering, videotape, were out of luck because all those technicians who did work with tape, the camera people, these were two-man crews,
Right.
They were not available. So I went to Calgary, and it turned out that I could work because there was only one ENG crew. We had 3 film cameramen who were in a different union. The film editors were in a different union, so they were working, and the film processing was outside the building. So we could shoot film, process it, bring it back in the building, crossing picket lines, and have it edited and on the air. So I worked the whole summer. Unlike my 5 colleagues, none of them worked. I'm the only one who did that summer.
Did you have a job before CBC?
I did. I worked at, interesting. So I graduated university. I have I'm proud to say I have the honor of being rejected at all 15 law schools in the country. And so I was kind of at wit's end. So I went to work in the real world doing, I sold clothes at Tip Top Tailors in St. John's for about a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just something to do, and make some money. Still living at home, 20 years old or whatever, and just hanging out with a different group of guys. I was pretty good at it. I actually set a sales record one time. I sold $10,000 worth of clothes in a day.
You're like a Renaissance man.
Anyway, that was a bit of fun. But here's the little 10,000 watt radio station, Fresno, California story. So I was working in this station, or in the Tip Top Tailors downtown. And I decided I was interested in media. I'd grown up in the house with my father was a newspaper man, even though I didn't connect the idea of me doing that as a career. I love sports. I used to do sports casting, play-by-play of street hockey from the window of my house on a tape recorder. Right. And I watched everything in sports, and I read sports magazines and all that. But I never, how do you get to there? Where's the A to B there? It's not like being a lawyer, doctor, other professions. So I kind of wrote it off as a childhood fantasy. And but I was always interested. Flash forward, I was thinking about my career. Law school didn't work out just as well. It would have been a huge mistake for the legal profession as well as me. And so I decided to. I had an interest in media. So there was a nighttime course being offered by the university. So I took that course in the winter of '80-'81. And the guy teaching it was a former CBC reporter. And one day he walked into the store. This is probably January of '81, and 1980, and he said, I thought he wanted to buy a tie or something. And he said, he talked to me, he said, I want you to come in and audition for a job at a private radio station in St. John's called Q Radio. And I said, really? He said, yeah. So I did. About a few days later, had to operate the board, had to operate the mic, had to punch audio carts, which carried the sound. Had done none of that in my life. It was like I can't believe I didn't implode. Anyway, he hired me. I was hired off the street like that. I went to work the next week, and within a month, I was writing and lining up and reading the 5 o'clock news on this station. So, but I'd already applied to Western to go to journalism school. I wanted to get out of Newfoundland. I wanted to go off on my own. I was, 22 and really wanted to make my own mark, kind of thing. And so I got and there's a story behind Western as well, if you're interested. But
well, what do you think you're here for, Tom? Of course. What's your first sign I might be interested? By the way, do you think that guy off the street hires you knew you were a Sanderling?
Maybe. I think he knew my brother, who actually worked at CBC St. John's at the time. Okay. But I don't know whether he saw, I don't know what he thought. He may have seen something.
It might help grease the wheel or whatever.
It might have, who knows. But either way, I got in and I was doing okay. But I had applied to Western. So probably with the spring of 1980, I got a letter from the university, from Western, addressed to me. I said, okay, this is it. Opened it up, and the letter was addressed to somebody else. Another student.
Oh, mistake.
Yes. And the applicant, that particular person, had been accepted. So I said, okay. So I decided I'd phone the university. So I found my way through to the journalism department, and the receptionist there picked up the phone, explained who I was and what had happened. She was quite apologetic. And I said, well, what do I, first of all, where am I? Am I in? Am I out? Or, she said, oh, you're on the waiting list. I said, okay, what does that mean? So where on the waiting list? You're 9th. Okay, what does that mean? He said, well, if 8 people ahead of you decide not to come, or people in the class decide not to come, you'll move up the list and eventually get in. I said, and this is less than a month away from the program starting. So I said, what do you think I should do? And she said, well, you could talk to the dean of admissions at the School of Journalism. I said, okay. So that day, I sat down at my father's typewriter and wrote a 2-page letter about why I wanted to be a journalist. And a week later, I got an acceptance letter.
Wow!
And went away.
You showed some initiative there, Tom.
I wanted to do it. Like it's
the first line is, "I was a Sanderling."
Right. I hadn't reached the top national champion. Yeah.
No Tommy Hunter.
I didn't even talk about those things. I don't think. But it goes to show you, kids. If you really if you want something, you got to go for it. So anyway, I got in, and it was a 1-year program. Went from May until April of '81, and it was a great experience for many reasons, including the fact I met my wife there. So
okay, and that worked out too.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're hitting home runs here. I think that's great advice. Like, not to be passive. Like, it's easy to just wait for the phone to ring or wait. But if you actually show some initiatives, be proactive and do what you did, like writing a letter or you're making the phone call and everything. I think the person, if it's a hiring for a job or accepting into a program, that carries a lot of weight.
I think so.
Like,
yeah,
you have passion in the belly, Tom Harrington.
Well, and this is the days of snail mail and long distance phone calls. So it's a different era, a different time, and but what doesn't change is ambition and a desire, and it's something I really decided I wanted to do. I made the right call because I had a great career and loved what I was doing every day.
And you bumped somebody down on that list, right? So
hopefully.
If you were ninth, you said?
Yeah.
So that's what, 8 people?
8 people ahead of me, or some of them may have gotten in as well who were on the waiting list like me, but there were people who didn't take the course as well, I suppose. And in the end, I finished in the top 5 or 6 of the class at the end.
And then it's from Western to CBC.
Into Calgary, yeah.
Into Calgary, where it all begins there. Okay, 44 years ago. So we are going to touch on some highlights, and I pulled some audio, and we're going to have a good chat here. But what made you decide it was time to hang up the headphones? I'm assuming this is all 100% Tom Harrington's decision to retire.
100%, yeah. So a couple of things. One, 44 years is a long time. I'm 67, and I've got a great career to look back on. So I'm not good. And the job I had, which I enjoyed, and my colleagues whom I loved, I wasn't going to be changing jobs. I wasn't going to be moving into another position at this point in my career. So it's that for as long as I wanted to do it. But I didn't want to hate the job. And I know over the years, I certainly met people outside the industry who had hated their job and counted the hours till it was over, and people at the CBC who were counting the days who didn't like what they were doing. And I never wanted to be in a position of hating the job or the people I work with. And that wasn't the case. I liked my work and the people I worked with when I left. Secondly, it was personal because I have a grandson since we saw you last. So, and our daughter and our grandson, Joel, live with us full time because of circumstances which are not worth getting into, but it's an unfortunate circumstance. However, they're with us full time. So my wife and I are full-time grandparents. And when he was born in January of last year, I took some time off to be at home to help out, just to have basically holiday time. And for about 3 weeks, I think, 5 weeks. And then I went back to work and felt weird about going back to work under the circumstances. And then so I took a chunk of time off. I had a surgery last spring. Then took about 2 months off in the summer because, when you work as long as I have, you bank time and you have a lot of vacation time. So I used almost all of that up to be at home. And when I went back to work in August of last year, I just said, I can't do this anymore. There's too much to be done at home, too much work. My wife's got some health issues, which make taking care of a rambunctious 17-month-old really difficult. And I said, I think it's time to hang it up. So I approached the people at CBC and said, if there's any possibility of leaving at a certain point, I'd be open to it.
Well, congratulations on a heck of a run.
Thanks,
Tom. That's amazing. And 44 years at the CBC, quite wild. I'm, since we last met, so you've got some developments in your life. I am now a CNN correspondent, Tom. So I feel like we're now equal. We're both journalists now.
Fantastic. I didn't see it. We'll have to look it up, but I saw the
I'll
references
send you
to
a
it.
link.
All
How's
right.
that? There's
good.
two CNN appearances.
Wow.
I know.
Oh,
Hard
cool,
to believe. Apparently, if I get a third, they're going to send me, they won't send me lasagna, but maybe they'll send me a CNN shirt.
Jake
or
Tapper will
something.
send you a Philly cheesesteak or something like that.
He'll sign a copy of his book.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that I'm a journalist, I need to ask you, was it in your mind at all? So in federal politics, until Donald Trump started talking about the 51st state, okay? Whenever that was. Let's go back.
Is that when you were on, though? I thought that was one of the reasons that the CNN talked to you.
Yeah, so this is un-CNN related now. We're talking about you now.
All
so,
right.
Okay. So when Donald Trump started talking about the 51st state, up until that moment, it really did look like a foregone conclusion that Pierre Poilievre would become the next Prime Minister
Indeed.
of Canada,
Yep.
and the Conservative Party of Canada would win a majority government, form a majority government. Pierre Poilievre said, anytime you ask him, he was very consistent. He wanted to defund the CBC. Did that at all play any role in your decision that maybe now is the time to step away?
None. Not at all. No. For a couple of things. One is that it was a good fundraising comment for Mr. Poilievre to say defund the CBC, can raise a lot of money off things like that.
Sure.
And the hashtag defund the CBC was very popular on social media, that sort of thing. And to my recollection, he kind of backed off a little bit during the election and sort of came back around a bit again to it. Either way, I wasn't so concerned about that.
It didn't play a role in your decision.
No, and I actually didn't think it would happen anyway, even if you won. Because it's too difficult to defund the CBC. It's almost impossible because there's too much involved. If the French network's too connected to the CBC English network, there are unions involved. There are billion-dollar pension funds involved. It's just too complicated. I think it would have been impossible to do. He might have done some cuts to the budget, and which would have been red meat to the people who hate the CBC. I think that's maybe as far as it would have gone.
Okay, here's hoping, because who knows what the future holds.
Just one point too on this, Mike.
Yes, sir.
In 40 years ago, so in 1985, the appropriation from the federal government for the CBC was a little over $1 billion, like a little over $1 billion. 40 years later, it's 1.4 billion. Which, in allowing for inflation, is a 50% cut in the appropriation from Ottawa for the CBC. When I started in 81, there were about 11,000 employees on the English services, radio and television. Now there's about 5. And that's doing way more with multiple services, platforms, digital, you name it. So we're doing more with honestly less money. And I think unfortunately, we've seen the effects of that.
Well, we should give more money to the CBC.
I don't disagree with that at all.
One of the people who worked for the CBC back in the 80s was a guy named Steve Paikin. Do you know Steve Paikin?
I know Steve very well.
Okay, so Steve, you're here, an exit interview of sorts. We're saying goodbye, not from this wonderful planet. This is not a shout out to Ridley Funeral Home, but you're no longer going to be in our headphones coming. That voice of yours. We'll get back to it, but Tom Harrington. I had a guy over this morning named Larry, and I just asked him off the cuff, like, hey. You listen to CBC, right? And he's like, yeah, I listen to CBC. I go, do you know Tom Harrington? And he's basically told me about how much his wife loves Tom Harrington. I got a whole story.
Wow.
I'm not saying Larry doesn't like you. I'm just saying his wife loves you.
Sure.
Okay.
That's very nice.
But, you become when you're in our homes for decades, you become a member of people's family. Like they're like, oh, Tom, and to just be gone after 44 years, we need to celebrate that. And this is your exit interview. But I brought up Steve Paikin because he came over, was that last week? Or it was very recent. He came over for an exit interview of sorts because the agenda is coming to an end. And he's got a new deal. He'll do a little podcasting.
Yeah, we had lunch about 2 weeks ago. Actually.
You got the full update there. Okay, so he told me he's going to be making about 75% less money is what he told me. He's going to be doing at least 75% less work as well. But I asked him about you, and here's what Steve Paikin said.
Tom Harrington and I have been pals for a long time, and he is one of 3 Harrington siblings that I have worked with during my so-called career. Not only Tom, but also Beth Harrington, who did entertainment reporting at CBLT when I was there more than 30 years ago, and Denise Harrington, who was Queen's Park reporter for CBLT when I was there. And so he's, there's one of I've worked with 3 Harrington kids, and I'm sure there are more, and maybe I will look forward to working with one of them someday.
So just so I understand here, how many members of the Sanderlings worked for the CBC at some point?
Actually, well, the two sisters he mentioned, Beth and Denise, and I were in the group, and my brother Paul also worked for CBC. So at one point, we were all working for CBC in like the late 80s, early 90s. My brother Paul, he was a reporter for many years. Then he became a host of Land and Sea, the broadcast that people may be familiar with in St. John's. Then he went to the mainland, came to Ottawa, and was the executive producer was the senior producer of their Ottawa Supper Hour TV newscast. Then he became executive producer of On the Road Again. That was Wayne Rostad's travel show. He did that for several years. Then he ran Marketplace for 5 years, long before I got there. Then he went to CBC Sports and did documentaries there for CBC, and then retired and left and became Brian Williams' producer at CTV and TSN.
The time here in London is 2:21 local time.
So there were four of us. So Denise went on to become a national reporter on Parliament Hill. Beth was a budget cut at CBC in the mid '90s, but she was her history with CBC also goes back a long way. So there were four of us, and I was doing sports in Montreal at the time. So four of us were at CBC, all in different areas of expertise, all in television.
I think that's a fun fact for people. I'm not sure I knew that, for example. I don't think it came up in the first
may not have, yeah.
first chat.
Yeah.
But Paikin, he's forever a journalist. He's filling me in here.
A good guy and a great broadcaster.
Well, I was going to ask you about so I know you're friends with him, so how will Tom be unbiased? But what do you think of Steve Paikin as a broadcaster?
I think he is a Canadian icon, even though he works mostly in Ontario, because most people in Canada don't see him every night like they can.
But they
in
saw
Ontario.
him moderating a federal debate recently.
And he did them several more few years ago as well. Steve is very capable. He's very smart. He's also completely self-effacing. It's never about him when he does his programs. Like he'll do interviews and you don't even know who did them, which I think is a testament to how good you are. When it's like in a hockey game, you don't know who ref the game, and all you know is a really well ref game. And Steve's used that analogy a lot too. He doesn't want to be known for the guy who ran the debate and was all about him. Plus, he's a huge sports fan, which is how I first got to know him, because I was on basically Studio 2 as a sports panelist back in the early 2000s, sort of over 20 years ago. That's how we became friends, and his passion for sports, and he takes every opportunity to wear sports paraphernalia when he doesn't have to wear a suit. So he's just a really well-rounded broadcaster and a good person.
So his three teams are the Hamilton Ticats,
right?
Oski Wee Wee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. I can't remember the rules, but I just did. The Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yes.
So Steve and I have that in common.
Yes.
It's the one thing we have in common there. And the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah.
What's your favorite sport to watch on the television?
I would say, this will probably upset some people, but I watch hockey, but I'm not a Leafs fan. Sorry. I wasn't born in Toronto, and I grew up a Rangers fan, and then kind of lost interest after they won the Cup in '94. So my two favorite sports to watch and teams to watch are Liverpool Football Club in the Premier League and the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL. I've been a Chiefs fan since 1972. Don't call me a bandwagoner. I've been a Chiefs fan since 72 now. So I went through a lot of frustration before they came through and won in 2020. And a Liverpool fan I became because me and a bunch of friends go to England every couple of years to watch football matches. And we decided to pick teams back in 2008 or 9. And I picked Liverpool because I grew up reading about the great Liverpool teams of the 70s. So those are my two that I watched.
I thought maybe because you like the Beatles.
Oh, I do like the Beatles, for sure.
But this was a good year for Liverpool.
It was. They won the Premier League. Yep. And the Chiefs got blasted in the Super Bowl trying to do the three-peat, but I'd rather be in the game than not. So I was disappointed in the loss, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
You've had enough success lately with the Chiefs.
Exactly. They hate us all anyway now. So
wow. Okay, so shout out to Steve Paikin if you're listening. You mentioned Marketplace earlier, so I just want to play a little teaser here.
This week on Marketplace.
They're harassing us.
This is Sam from the cleaning service.
Telemarketers from hell.
Sexually harassing people over the phone? That's disgusting.
We're out to catch them breaking the rules.
I'm on the do not call list.
And boldly go where we've never gone before. Taking you undercover, half a world away. Inside a call center that might have called you.
I am calling you from Air Duct Cleaning Services.
And we take your complaints to Canada's watchdog.
We've talked to Canadians on the do not call list. They're frustrated and exasperated and angry.
Marketplace. Every time I, Marketplace, I think of Peter Silverman on City TV, who I grew up watching with Silverman Helps, and he would say, "Watch it, buddy."
Yeah, I've heard of him. Having not lived in Toronto in that period, I didn't see him on the air, but I heard the name.
Right. No longer with us, but we miss the great Peter Silverman. But you were at Marketplace for 5 years, is that right?
I was. I had been doing sports for many years, although I had been doing lots of other work as well, like on The Current and As It Happens and programs like that. And then Marketplace approached me if I was interested in working for the program back in 2010. I was getting ready to go to the World Cup in South Africa to cover that for the national. And I just done the Vancouver Whistler Olympics. I was in Whistler in 2010 for CBC as well, CBC News in those days. So, and yes, they approached me about joining the program, and because Wendy Mesley had left, and I was flattered, and of course I had history a little bit because knowing my brother had run the show 20 years before, and I was flattered. And then I'll give you a little inside story as to what happened with that job.
Yes, please.
So they were trying to recruit me, and we were talking outside the building, sort of on the QT and this sort of thing. I was working at the National at the time. And then in June of 2010, I got a call from the producer saying they were going to be posting the position, which is what you do at CBC. It's called like posting it, and then boarding people, which is the job interview. That's the term CBC uses. So it's literally a board, like a panel of like 5-6 people who ask you questions. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I've done multiple boards in my career. I've gotten the job, not gotten the job. I said, you are the ones who recruited me. I'm not. There's nothing more in a job interview you're going to learn you don't already know. So I'm going to pass. And I'm going to have to go to the World Cup. I'm going to be there for over a month. And you do what you have to do. If you find somebody you like, no problem. If you don't, call me back. And I'd never done anything like that in my career, but I'd kind of had it.
Right.
CBCs can be very bureaucratic. And so I decided to do that. I went to the World Cup and came back to Toronto, my wife and I, and took our daughter to New York for 5 days for a trip. And then I got back to Toronto and I got a call. And they said, are you still interested? And I said, sure. And he said, okay, job's yours.
Wow.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah. And well, I don't know if it worked or not, but I just wasn't going to subject myself to that kind of.
I'd say it worked.
Yeah. So in those days, Marketplace, the year I joined, 2010-11, Marketplace was in kind of a rough spot. It had been a titanic program in the 70s and 80s, like huge audiences and like a brand that was nationally known. By 2010, it was in trouble. The year I was on, we did 9 episodes. A normal TV season's 22, 23. Right. So there was some pressure as well to keep the show moving around on the schedule. So that year, they moved the show was on Fridays at 8:30 after Rick Mercer's rerun, which never made sense to me because why would you sit through a rerun if you saw it and come back and watch it? It's 8:30. So they flipped at 8 o'clock, which was smart. That's the hour to tune in, prime time. Well, that year, I'm not saying it's because I was there, but the year the ratings went up 35%. That's my first season.
That's a jump.
Yeah, and the second season we started hitting 1 million viewers in an episode. It's still like a truncated season. Season 3, the CBC decided to give Marketplace back a full season, which never happens. Once they start pulling away,
right.
Once you start losing the beachhead, so to speak, of being a regular network program, it's hard to get that back. So they went, in the third year I was there, the show went from 9 episodes to 23, which I'm very proud of. And I don't, I'm not, we had a great show, fabulous creative producers. Erica Johnson was the co-host at the time. Like we had a really good team group, very, very talented and hustled and very creative. But I'd like to think that I helped, that there were episodes that we had that struck 1 million week after week, which also hadn't happened in years. And so by year 3, Marketplace was back. And by the time I left in 2015, it was one of the most popular. It was in the top 10 in Canada, actually.
So why do you leave in 2015?
Well, when they approached me about the job, and I was excited to be doing television on a big network show because Marketplace was a big brand, but it was consumer journalism, and which was something first of all I knew nothing about. Second of all, it's a bit like it's very narrow. It's even narrower than sports, in my opinion. At least in sports, I covered all kinds of issues. I did documentaries on doping and spousal abuse and fighting in hockey and like insurance in the horse racing, you name it. And I covered the Olympics, and I did docs on Donovan Bailey and Clara Hughes, people like that. So I'd had a wide range.
I recorded with Donovan yesterday.
Go on. Okay, we're supposed to do lunch at some point because we were kind of buds.
You want me to broker that that deal?
Sure thing. Anyway, so I had done a lot of different things in sports, a lot of kinds of subject matter, that kind of thing, a lot of different assignments. So the consumer thing kind of worried me, but so I said to myself, I'll give myself 5 years, see how I feel after 5 years of doing it. And if I still like it, great. If I'm kind of getting bored or whatever,
right,
I'll think about it. So by year 4, I was already having those thoughts. Not that I hated it or anything like that. It was a lot of fun and we were doing really well, but the material, the story, the subject matter was becoming a bit, for me, repetitive. And so by season 5, I was kind of done and really wanted something different. And at the time, Bernie McNamee, who you've had on your program, fantastic.
Loved my chat with Bernie.
Yeah, he's a tremendous guy and a hell of a broadcaster. So he was retiring as the voice of the World This Hour. Now in those days, World This Hour was 10 minutes. It was on the hour in the afternoons, but it was like World Report. It had 10 minutes as opposed to 4.5, like the hourlies do now, or the World This Hour does now. So anyway, he was leaving, he was retiring, and the CBC News Management offered me the position, and I took it. So that's how I ended up there.
Speaking of audio bits I searched for and couldn't find because I wanted to play it on this program. Okay, so I wanted to find your sign off. Your last day of work. What was it? March 28th. What was your last?
Yeah, March 28th.
March 28th, 2025. The World This Hour. There's a
actually Your World Tonight. That's the 6 o'clock show. Yeah.
Okay.
I did that Friday nights. I did the World This Hour Monday through Thursday. Yeah.
Okay, but so I was just trying to find your sign off. Came up empty, and I mean, to me, it's like, oh well, this is a pod. I literally could show you my phone right now. Like I'm subscribed to these shows as a podcast, but it seems like only more recent shows are in the feed, and everything else gets like deleted from the server. After
that may be the case.
Not your problem now. Not your problem now. But anyways, I desperately tried. But what I did find, and I'm just gonna play it. I actually found this. I think it was a Facebook group for like fans of the CBC.
Right.
So this is not your final sign up, but I do want to ask you about this.
For Friday, February 14th, I'm Tom Harrington. Thanks for listening tonight. Stay safe and take care of each other.
So these stay safe and take care of each other. Was that a COVID thing?
Yes. So I'm not big into finding signature things to say, like
and that's the way I see it.
Right. Walter Cronkite or Lloyd Robertson and even Bernie. Like Bernie, when he was doing World This Hour, he would do sign-offs or at least sign-ons. It's such and such a time in like Bonavista, Newfoundland, or whatever, those sort of things. Right. But that was him, and I wasn't going to try to imitate that. So I didn't do anything like that in the first number of years I was doing the program. But during COVID, where it was brutal and depressing, and particularly and also I was going into work with a handful of people during COVID, like the building was virtually empty, but we kept broadcasting from the building. So I would go into work every day. And at one point, I can't remember when it was, but there must have been an event in particular that would sort of struck me as like, oh, for the love of God kind of thing, more of this. It may have been a Canadian story about maybe a tragic death or something. I don't recall. All I know is I just decided to say that, to stay safe and take care of each other. And I told the senior producer that I was going to do it. And he was skeptical, partly because things like that can sound kind of maudlin and contrived and all that sort of thing. But if there's something I prided myself on, Mike, is that I feel like people think that the kind of guy they hear on the radio is the kind of guy they meet on the street, and that I'm a real person, and I'm like, so trying to be human on the broadcast is a big part of my belief in doing it properly. So I didn't think I'd be taking a chance by signing kind of.
Well, people
contrived.
found solace in it. Like
they did. Like I did not know how much it would affect people, but the way it did, but it really did.
And it's reassuring to have that familiar voice. Like this is why I like, be it, I don't know, we'll pick on FOTM Peter Mansbridge, but somebody you're just comfortable with when something terrible is happening or something. Getting the news from that familiar, trusted voice is invaluable.
I think so. I don't. It's not, when you're doing it, oddly enough, it's a bit like what you're doing now. You put a podcast out there, you're assuming people are listening to it because what would be the point?
Oh, I'm not recording this, Tom.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding.
Great. Take two. So when you're putting out a newscast day in, day out, hour after hour, like I did with the World This Hour and Your World Tonight, World at 6 on Fridays, you're putting it out there because you want to inform people, but you really don't know how it's reaching or affecting people. It's not like you make something in a factory that you see at the end of the day or making like there's a tangible outcome to your workday.
Right.
Ours isn't tangible. We just put it out there and hope people get the information. So you don't, on one level, you don't really know if you're getting through. And there are times, obviously, when I hear things that there'd be posts on social media after the show that were after the program that I said something or whatever that were very kind, but that was occasional, it wasn't constant. And but when I announced my retirement and then did my last broadcast, the reactions, the comments were unbelievable. There are people who wrote me and said they were driving around listening to my last newscast. Some people said they were in tears, and I go, "Oh my God, really?" Like I didn't think
it was a rough period for so many Canadians. Like we, looking back now, and we're talking here in June 2025, but it was tough. It was this pandemic.
Was,
so I mean, the people were very emotional.
Yeah,
and there was that feeling of what's going to happen next. When can we get back to this normalcy we've had forever?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why apparently it did stick, and I didn't know if it would. And I have colleagues who said that they felt they couldn't do it, or it wouldn't be in their personality. Right. I felt it was kind of something I would kind of do in ordinary circumstances anyway, so it didn't seem like a stretch. But the fact that it meant so much to people and it stuck, and it made them feel a bit better about the situation because I was saying it every Friday, and I only did it on The World at 6. I never did it on The World This Hour. I'd say thanks for listening on The World This Hour, but I would only on World at 6, and I did it or The World Tonight. If I was doing it for a month, I did it every night. If I was doing it Friday nights only, that period of time, I did it then. Either way, it was always present, and so that's why I incorporated into the end of my final newscast as well. And so people,
the one on March 28th.
Yes, yeah. I wrote a sort of a
the one I'd play right now if I could find it.
I know, I'm kind of surprised.
You got it in your back pocket?
Yeah, I don't. I'm hopeless at that kind of stuff. I don't.
And I was going because there were, on be it Reddit or there were different threads where people are talking about Tom Harrington, beloved journalist Tom Harrington hangs up his headphones and
presses the button off.
Right.
Off button,
and I kept thinking, well, somebody, because that's the kind of thing I would do.
Sure.
I'm actually disappointed in myself because just for posterity, like you'd archive it and you'd be like, maybe you'll throw it on your YouTube channel or like the final sign off of Tom Harrington's career. So the fact that I couldn't find it, it ticked me off that in real time I didn't have the wherewithal to archive it. It is my role, Tom Harrington, to archive these things.
Yeah, you know what? The other thing you might have tried was CBC Radio Archives exists, and it is accessible to the public, I believe. It might have been there, but that would take some time to find it now, I think. And I'm not guaranteed it is there, even though it may be worth posterity.
If I do find it, I'll play it on a future episode.
Okay, fair enough.
Toronto Mike.
Thanks.
So to switch channels here, back to the Olympics for a moment here.
Yes.
So were you at the gold medal game where Sidney Crosby scored the golden goal?
I was not, because we didn't have the rights. The games in Vancouver were CTV's games and TSN. So we weren't. I was there. I was in Whistler actually when the game was being played that Sunday, and working on something else actually for the National that night. When you're not the rights holder, and CTV knows because for years they weren't, and when you're not the rights holder, your access is really limited. Not only to the video, you can't use most of it. 90% of it you can't use at all.
No, you got to show like that still or whatever.
You show stills and things like that. So you have to, or you can use it a little bit with permission and with the credit, crediting all over it. So it was a real challenge. In 2010 was the first games we'd done since '94. Since CTV had gotten out of the games, was they had 94 Littlehammer, and then they were done. So we had Atlanta 96. That's when I started doing the games.
Okay, so I'm going to get back to 96.
Yeah.
But one thing I know is when I watched the Four Nations tournament, I noticed, so that's a Rogers presentation, okay? And I noticed they would they were showing all the iconic Canadian moments, Paul Henderson,
sure, and Mary Lemieux. Yeah.
Mary Lemieux, you know the regs or whatever. And then the ones that you could tell when it came to Crosby, we never saw footage. Like, it's basically like, they can't show footage of the golden goal because that's
partly
absent.
It's partly CTV, but it's mostly the IOC. The International Olympic Committee is really difficult on rights. Like they own this stuff for basically eternity,
right?
And getting access to it is extremely difficult.
And they're not exactly under the radar over there at Rogers Sportsnet, so they gotta be careful there. Where I maybe have to be less careful. But I do want to ask you about 96 here because I mentioned I do produce Donovan Bailey's podcast, which is called Running Things of Donovan Bailey.
Cool.
Co-hosted by Jason Portwando. We recorded last night about 8:30 last night. We recorded an episode. And I'm wondering, were you there for the 2 gold medals that Donovan Bailey won in Atlanta?
I was not. So this was my first games for CBC Sports, and which that in itself was a huge moment in my career. But in terms of those two races, I watched the first one that when Donovan set the world record and won the gold, 984 in our hotel, because getting access to the building, and plus I think I had a shoot first thing the next morning. Anyway, it was just logistically was too difficult. And the Saturday of the relay, I was at another venue working, I think, and I couldn't. I don't even think I saw the race in live real time. I did see the 100 final in real time on TV, but not the relay. And the thing is, a little tidbit here. So when CBC at least does the Olympics, the broadcast is CBC's feed is pumped into the Athletes Village, so the athletes can watch it. So they can when they're not playing or competing, they can sit back and watch their fellow teammates compete at the Village. And the same thing with the hotel. The hotels we all stayed at also have the CBC feed, so we can see what our people are up to.
Okay. Now I have a question. Now that you're not with the CBC, I can ask you. So what were the rules when you were at the CBC? What were the rules if you were asked to appear on a non-CBC show? So I'm curious, is there a process at CBC where you need to ask, I don't know, you file a request or something that will be either accepted or not? Let's be very specific here. Let's talk about Toronto Mic'd, okay?
Okay.
So you were on Toronto
Yes.
Mic'd. And I was going to pull the exact date to be smart. Yeah, August 2021.
Right.
How could we forget episode 896? It was a great one. So did you need to request permission to be in my backyard, to be on my airwaves, if you will?
Yes. So every appearance that's not a CBC appearance has to be approved by CBC News Management. And so that could be anything from your podcast to making a speech somewhere, to appearing in even in a different in some kind of different venue even appearing on what would be considered a competitor's program. So all those things have to be considered, and there are rules about what you can and cannot say. They don't want you talking about politics. They don't want you talking like internet, national politics or whatever. They don't want you talking about internal CBC workings, policies, things like that. And so there are some pretty tight guidelines. It's the same with, for example, you have something called the Journalism Standards and Practices, JSP, which governs everything that we do, everything from hidden cameras to social media, and how CBC journalists, that not just reporters, but producers, camera people, everybody has to conduct themselves when they're working for the CBC. So there are a lot of guidelines. People don't actually realize that. And they're actually public. You can go on the website and look at them. And so we are guided by pretty stringent policies about what we can and can't say. I don't know if you saw that story the other day about Terry Moran, the ABC News correspondent.
Yes, I did, of course, yes.
So if I had posted something like that about, say, the Prime Minister or a senior advisor, without CBC knowing, I just posted on my feed on a late Saturday night, drunk tweet or whatever, I would be suspended at least, and potentially fired. It'd be hard to be fired because, like the CBC's, if you're a staff person, the union gets involved and there's a process that could prevent you from being fired. The fact of the matter is, I'm not surprised that happened to him. Honestly, I know people that say, "Oh, he said what the truth is." You know what? Half America voted for the guy. So it's not necessarily their truth, and he's a national correspondent. You can't really do that.
It's the optics, right?
Yeah. So so getting back to your point. Yes, I had to get approval to be on your program and any other podcast or any other program or any other publication, even if I was being interviewed for a newspaper article, those sorts of things, and I'd have to get approval from the CBC.
Okay, obviously they said yes because we recorded that episode. Yes. And what about accepting gifts?
Again, under the JSP, I'm not allowed. So there are limits. There's literally a dollar limit on certain things, but I can't I couldn't take free tickets to a hockey game or something like that from a sponsor. Like, it's one thing to do with your brother-in-law or whatever, a friend, but
Sure.
if you're dealing with if a sponsor or something offered me, I'd say no. If I was given a gift, usually what happened, and this goes back decades when I was at CBC, if I was given something like let's say maybe a fancy mug or something for I would donate that to this Christmas draw. So all the gifts, all the swag, all the graft that CBC reporters and people got would be rounded up at the end of the year, and there'd be a Christmas draw, and you could re-gift it to somebody else. But it wasn't, technically speaking, it wasn't yours. So it all got thrown into a pot.
But so there's a dollar limit, right? You can accept under.
Yeah, it's
so a mug would be under. But but what do you know? Do you know what that number is?
I can't remember what it is, but either way,
we're talking $200.
Oh God, no, less than that. Much less than that. Yeah,
$50.
Maybe.
Okay.
Under 100 for sure.
I'm just curious because I give every guest, you know what I give them? I give them a large lasagna from Palma Pasta.
Yep.
I have one for you today.
Yes, I see that. Thank you.
No, it's it's in my freezer.
Okay.
This is for show.
This one was running a bit until
That one's just for the cameras.
Yeah.
But I do have fresh craft beer for you from Great Lakes Brewery.
Right.
And I have a book for you on Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. They play at Christie Pitts.
I know they do.
Ever been to a Leafs game?
We did I have not. We did a documentary when I did this show called Sports Journal at CBC back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we did a piece on the history of the club and on Jack. Domenico. Jack Domenico.
Yeah, they named the field after.
Yeah, well, there he is. So he was actually featured. He was still around then.
Sure.
So the Leafs history I know very well indeed. Yeah.
Rob Butler, by the way, told me that Jack would suppress his batting average so nobody ever batted over 500. So he told him this is very recently.
Okay.
Rob Butler, who now manages the Toronto Maple, but they have new ownership now.
Right.
And now they wisely sponsor this very program because they're wise people. I got to throw the first pitch a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, nice. I think I saw your post on that.
Yeah. You got to catch up here. Okay. CNN, first pitch, lots has changed here. Okay.
Yeah.
But like he said, he had a stretch where he went 12 for 13 and his average went down.
Oh, Jack. He was something else.
He was something else. I also heard he would pass around like you'd be all sitting on the hill at Christie Pitts there, and they'd pass around some kind of a cup or something for people to donate money or whatever. That no longer happens, everybody. So
it was a mom and pop operation basically for decades. It was incredible. Tremendous.
So incredible baseball there. I just urge you to go there. But these are the types, and also I don't know what the value of this is. I think it's more money than you'd ever imagine. But this is a Ridley Funeral Home measuring tape for you, Tom. Courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home.
So to make sure I fit in the box when I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you got to measure yourself for the casket.
Yeah, exactly.
You can get a kiss casket or something like that. Okay, so beer.
Yes.
Lasagna.
Yes.
Book.
Yes.
Measuring tape.
Yes.
I'm going to say in my head, I'm going to do quick math here and say, like, if you're looking at, let's say that's $80 worth of stuff.
Yeah.
You'd have to say no, thank you.
Maybe. So remember, you offered me
over here, Tom. It's okay.
You offered me this last time I was here. You remember? Obviously, I had pasta. I didn't have there wasn't the book.
No,
it was
the
the pasta and the beer.
New thing, yeah.
I didn't take the beer because I don't drink beer. I don't like beer,
right.
even though I was a sports guy. I hate beer. But I did take the pasta because it was whatever that was worth. And I don't think I even disclosed that I took the pasta. And frankly, they wouldn't have really.
They're not
going to
come at you for that palma pasta. Let me know if they do.
It's not like it's really ultimately it's about preventing much larger conflicts of interest, of which we've had a few over the years at CBC. So it's things that the higher profile stuff, a box of pasta is not going to really upset a lot of people, but the kind of stuff that's red meat for the opponents of the CBC, that's the kind of thing you have to avoid.
Right. And now that you're retired, I can get all the real talk on all this, right? Like I feel like I can ask you the question. I will shout out FOTM Simon Dingley. Do you know Simon?
Simon's a buddy of mine.
Okay, so Simon came by. I think his last day was Friday.
I listened to it.
May 3rd, actually, 2024. Okay, but he dropped by on like the Wednesday. I want to say he had 2 days left before he was retiring.
Right.
Him and Jeannie Lee are having the time of their lives. I see these photos on social media. They're having a good time. Okay.
Yep.
And he said, even though I have 2 days left at the CBC, I will not accept these gifts. That's the kind of guy Simon is.
Yes.
Didn't accept any of the gifts.
Yeah.
So here,
and him turning down beer, and he won't mind me saying this, is an extraordinary sacrifice.
Well, Simon, now that you're retired for a good, over a year now, come by and I'll get you your Great Lakes beer. Hey, let me do this quick plug of something exciting happening on June 26th. And then we'll get right back to that. I want to invite you, Tom, and you can bring the whole family, and anyone listening is invited. Simon, bring Jeannie. I think they live nearby, for goodness sakes. Great Lakes Brewery, which is 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard, which is down the street from the Costco in South Etobicoke, not very far from like Royal York and Queensway. That's what we're talking about here. They're going to host us for TMLX 19, the 19th Toronto Mike Listener Experience from 6 to 9 p.m. on June 26th. That's a Thursday. It's coming up. And not only is your first beer on the house, courtesy of Great Lakes Brewery, but Palma Pasta is going to feed everybody who comes.
Nice.
Like free food, free drink, no ticket required. Come by, hang out, say hi, meet some fellow FOTMs that are in attendance. That's happening June 26th. TMLX 19.
19.
Wow. That's Paul Hardcastle. Do you remember this song? The average age of the Vietnam soldier was 25, but he was 19. 19.
Wow. That's a deep dive. Yeah.
Paul Hardcastle. Okay. So where do I pick this up? We were talking about the Olympics. I'm just going to check my notes because I know exactly how I want to close this. Oh, yes. A few questions on your retirement. One is, are you friendly with Heather Hiscox?
I am.
She's retiring.
She is. in November, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. So again, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Tom, but I feel like now your second visit, we're like buds now. Okay. We're buddies now. Could you somehow introduce me to Heather so I could invite her maybe this fall? She comes over for her exit interview.
Well, she won't do it until she's done, I'm sure.
Well, yeah,
so
this fall,
probably be December at the earliest.
I can wait till December.
While I'm on this point, did Scott Russell come on?
You know
with
what? No, but he said he would.
Okay.
And then he became like, what is he, in charge of a university or something?
Yeah, that takes him out of town a little bit, but
So I would have zoomed with him, but he agreed to an exit interview.
Okay.
I did recently have a fantastic visit from Devin Haru.
Oh yeah.
And it was we were talking about Summer McIntosh, and I think it was last night.
Yes.
Basically, she did everything he predicted. She did everything that Devin predicted she would do.
Right. She set 3 world records in 5 days.
We're talking about just sky's the limit. And
totally.
now working with the coach of Michael Phelps. Have
Right.
you heard this? So anyways, what's happening with Summer is unbelievable. I can't wait for the next Olympics. But Scott Russell was a highly desired, sought-after guest of mine who said yes and then disappeared into the abyss.
Okay.
So
I can plant the seed again with him.
Plant some seeds for me here, brother. Like Heather, I'll do it after she's done. Obviously, I can do it in 2026 if she wants. Scott Russell, it's not too late. Let's make all this happen.
Sure. And they're both Scott's a Western grad like me, and I think so is Heather too. Heather worked in London, Ontario. So, I think Heather be a blast. He's a just tremendous career for CBC. So I'll do my best, Michael.
Do you want to perhaps shout out? I'm just curious, like along the way, you're 44 years at CBC. I'm wondering, who are your mentors? Like, who is it that you looked up to on your way up the last 44 years that maybe we could shout out here?
Oh boy, I would say
tough questions here, Tom Harrington.
Well, it's 44 years is a lot. There were people in Montreal, broadcasters I work with who were also friends. Yvan Renaud, who did the late night news in Montreal with me for several years, really talented broadcaster and absolutely freaking hilarious. We'd made mayhem at late night and had our late night show was higher rated than our 6 o'clock show actually. And he's a friend rather than a mentor, I guess. I had. In radio, I hate to say, but sadly, a guy named Peter Leo, who actually died during COVID on his birthday in 2020. Peter, he was running World This Hour when I arrived in 2015, and I was coming from TV, and radio and TV. We get along, but there's always sometimes a bit of tension. So the TV guy kind of comes in, and Bigfoot's at radio, and comes in to do the radio job. It can be a little bit uneasy. At least I was worried it would be, and it wasn't, and mostly because of him. And we became really, really good friends. We used to go to TFC games together, and we talked NFL all the time. And he made me the backup host on The World at 6 and put me on election specials, and really believed in my talent. And surprisingly, Mike, not a lot of people were like that for me at the CBC. I didn't have a lot of real mentors who took me under their wing and sort of guided me towards places. Most of what I did, I earned. I didn't have people on my shoulder saying, get this guy. So Peter stands out because he was one of the few champions that I had. And that was late in my career. So over the years, I'll tell you a story though. Very beginning of my career, literally the beginning in Calgary. So I had started in May of '81, and the idea was during the summer you sort of check in with the bosses to see how you're doing. I was 23 years old, right out of school. I was working pretty regularly, getting stories on the air. And one day the senior producer brought me in for a meeting with the assignment editor. The assignment editor was new, and she had worked for the senior producer for a long time and wanted to impress him. So she was really being hard on me. I thought it was just me saying, like, maybe it's not just me, but it turned out it was. And my colleagues in the newsroom noticed it. And it was really difficult. It sort of made me feel nervous, and my confidence was shaky. I'm trying to prove myself. So then one day, I think it was July, he called us into a meeting, just the three of us, to watch a show, a documentary, a 5-minute piece or whatever. And I think that was the ruse, because he really wanted to get us in the room. And after it was over, we talked a bit about the story. And then I said, well, now that I have you here, part of this program is to get some feedback of how I'm doing. And the assignment editor cut me to ribbons in front of him. Basically said, like, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think I don't know how you're not really a committed journalist. You're not doing the things you're supposed to be. Anyway, a lot of it went out of my head because I got that ringing ear when you're having a panic attack. I was almost in tears because I thought this was my career.
And you're 23, you said?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I thought to myself, I'm done. And it was pretty bad. And so I shuffled out of there and spent the rest of the day kind of careening around, wondering what I'm going to do next. Sell shoes, I guess. Do something. It's not going to be doing television news. And the next day, I was called into the boss's office, and he closed the door, and I said, "Okay, here we go." And he had some tape of some of my stories and that I'd done that summer so far. And then he turned to me and he said, he give me some tips, and he said, "I think you've got a lot of talent. I think you're really going to go far, and just keep doing what you're doing," kind of thing. Vaguely, and I nearly cried. I nearly cried in the office because I thought my career was over, and he literally pulled me out from under the water and saved me, and I've never forgotten that.
And I'm doing the math. If you're 67 now, and that's the very beginning of your career.
Yes. It was like literally the first 2 months I was on the job.
Right.
Yeah, and he saved my career. So there are moments like that that I don't forget, both bad and good, and they sort of shape you as a person and it's my line of work, a journalist, and also shapes your outlook on the industry. I certainly had a much more cynical, I'll say, view of the business. Like 3 years later, I was in Montreal doing radio sports. Just a year after I arrived, I lost my job. In budget cuts in December of '84, 2 weeks before Christmas. I got a note saying I'm going to be out of a job as of March 31st, '85. And out of the blue, I've been in Montreal about a little over a year, doing radio sports and having a blast and kicking ass, I thought. But I was going to lose my job. And then a few months later, I got it back because the Montreal Expos, remember them? And the Canadians and the Montreal Concords football team and McGill University and Concordia and Bishop's University all wrote letters to the CBC's leadership saying they should not cut this position. It was a radio sports job, afternoon job. So I do the sports in the afternoon show and do game coverage at night for the morning show. I was, just working my ass off and having a blast and doing pretty well. Anyway, they saved me. They saved the job. 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave, the job was reinstated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, do you believe in miracles, Tom?
Sometimes. That was one. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, now I'm wondering if there are any moments we can shout out on our because I know how I want to close. I actually want to close on a musical note. Are there any moments through these 44 years that really stick out as you reflect back on I'm sure you've done some reflection since you stepped away in March 2025. But any moments, any particular stories you worked, or anything you want to shout out from this 44-year career at the CBC?
Yeah, I would say the first one that comes to mind, I tell the story a lot, is my first games in Atlanta in '96. So when I was there, I was doing feature pieces with Scott Russell, Chris Cuthbert, Scott Oak. We're all doing items like feature pieces that would run during the coverage. And we were also preparing for our sports for those games. And my initial assignment was to do field hockey the first week and flatwater canoe kayak the second week. Then the week of before the game started, the Monday before the game started, I was told I was changed from field hockey to softball, women's softball, which was a new sport in the games, and Canada was favored to win the gold medal. And they decided we're going to have you do that instead. Now, here's the thing: there was no research done. I didn't even know all the teams in the tournament. I had no color commentator, and we weren't going to be in the ballpark. I was going to be in a booth smaller than your little area here, by like on a TV screen about the size of your monitor, calling the games off the TV, live. So I said, okay. So while I was cutting my stories, I spent the week trying to find someone to work with me. I did find a guy named Darryl Joy who worked for Softball Canada. I got some information on the teams who were playing and the stars of all the Americans. The Chinese Taipei was another one. Can't remember all the teams. I think Dominican Republic was one, Canada, the United States. So fast forward to the Friday, the middle Friday of the games. Canada was playing the United States in a big key game in the tournament. And it was supposed to start at 7:30 Eastern time in Columbus, Georgia. Remember, I was in a hallway, a tiny little phone booth sized booth in the hallway in the broadcast center in Atlanta. And by the way, I'd lost my color guy because he wasn't allowed to work on the broadcast because he worked for Softball Canada. So I was doing this by myself. So the Friday night, the game was supposed to start at 7:30, and they were going to come to me to do play-by-play and do some coverage. Yeah. We waited and waited. Rain delay. Games didn't start. It finally started at quarter to midnight Eastern time in Columbus. So we signed on at midnight, and during the games they were doing Brian Williams was hosting a live highlights show from at midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern, but it was on in primetime in BC, but it was actually broadcast across the country. So we on the wee hours in Newfoundland, etc. So anyway, he signs on at midnight saying, bonus coverage. softball, live softball from Columbus, Georgia. Here's Tom Harrington. So I called that game from midnight until 1:30 in the morning by myself off the TV across Canada. And that was my first Olympics and my first week at the Olympics.
Wow.
And so at one point, it was in a commercial break, and I had a moment where I remembered as being a kid watching the Munich Olympics when I was 14 and thinking to myself, I want to do that someday. I can do that. I'd like to work at the Olympics, right? And I started getting emotional. And then in my ear, I hear 30 seconds, and suddenly you snap out of it. And I pulled myself together because I was thinking about I'd arrived. And I signed off. The game ended. Canada lost to the Americans. I came out of the little booth, and the place is empty except for the crew putting the late night show on. They sign off at 2 a.m. Eastern. They come out. The senior producer came out of the control room, saw me in the hallway, walked over and hugged me. And they said, we couldn't believe what you were doing in there. He said, it was like, we were all listening saying, he sounds like he's in the ballpark. How's he doing this? And he's got nobody with him. He's calling him off the TV. And I was cracking jokes and saying Letterman's a rerun when you should be watching softball. I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I figure what's there to lose? Right. Anyway, that's certainly one of the top moments I'll ever have in my career.
Baptism by fire.
Totally. Yeah. It's like, it's working without it. It's on the high wire without a net, and I did another one if you want. I can give you another sports one.
Yeah. I love sports.
It's, I did freestyle skiing, the moguls and aerials, that sort of thing for sports for like 5 years. So in 98, before the Nagano Olympics, we did a bunch of World Cup events on CBC building up to the games because Canada was favored to win a whole bunch of medals in freestyle, Jean-Luc Brassard, people like that. And so we did the event in Mont-Tremblant, and it was the first time CBC was doing same-day coverage of freestyle. They'd never done it. That's how big they were literally investing in it. So it was Terry Leibel was the host, one of our Olympic hosts. It was, Anna Fraser was the color commentator, and me. So we were on the hillside, and it was during the ice storm in Quebec in 1998.
Right.
And so we were at Tremblant. The power went out in Tremblant, and we were using generators because our mobiles had generators. Anyway, make a long story short, they switched the schedule. So the moguls, which is what Brassard skis, would be on the Sunday. Normally it's Saturday, and the aerials are Sunday. They flipped the days. So on Saturday, we recorded the aerial competition. Saturday night into the early morning on Sunday, we recorded the tracks to the play-by-play, calling off tape, looking at it and calling it. Recorded that. That first hour would run while we're recording the second hour, which was the moguls, at the same time. In other words, as soon as the aerial stuff ended on tape, the tape of the moguls would then air. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but it's all on tape, but we're recording basically live, and we can't screw up. So it's a nice storm. We get to the booth. It's windy. The wind is blowing the rain, the icy, the sleet into our booth. It's like our papers are all running. The ink is running. We can't read anything. And then just before, literally, it's like when these things, 30 seconds, we're going to start recording. The power goes out. The monitors go black. And so we can't see anything. So all we can see is the bottom of the hill. So the senior producer was in our ear, and as the competitors came down the hill, he would tell us who it was. We had the start list, and he'd say what trick they did. And so then the color person would parrot what he said, and then I'd take them down the bottom of the hill when I could see them with my own eyes and across the finish line. We did that for all the entire finals.
Wow.
Live to tape, basically.
Yeah.
And you know what? You wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. And so we sign that off. We run downstairs. We do a piece to camera with Terry to close the show on. The show goes on 2 hours live. Boom. Done.
Wow.
And I got a letter from the head of CBC Sports about a week later saying, congratulating me on handling that situation. So those are the things in our line of work. It's when everything's going fine, it's, any monkey can do it.
Right.
It's when it's going down the shitter. That's when you find out if you got it. And I had it. That's one thing people always said about me in my career. If nothing else was, if it's going to hell, let's have Tom in the chair. So I've always been proud of that.
Well, you should be. That's awesome here. So, by the way, you mentioned the softball in '96, and I was thinking maybe I should, if you don't know already, that there's a woman pitching for the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team this season. I don't know if you're aware of this. Yeah. Ayami Soto.
Okay.
Who's a Japanese phenom. I've seen her pitch myself, my own eyes, 3 times now. Mm-hmm. 2 of those 3 times she was lights out. She got lit up a bit in the second appearance I saw her make, but because she doesn't have a lot of velocity on that fastball. Right. But that ball's got some movement to it. She's a very effective pitcher.
No reason why they can't throw a curve or a screwball or anything else.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of an interest, and there's going to be a women's baseball league starting up. I think it might be next year that this all ties together. I had this was also in the Rob Butler episode I teased earlier, but just interesting. You can go to Christy Pitts and watch Ayami Soto pitch for the Leafs.
Awesome.
Pretty cool. Okay, so I mentioned there Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. That means I can just remind everybody that the most recent episode of Toronto Mike before this one is Al Grego kicking out the Jams. Al's actually turning 50 years old tomorrow. So happy birthday to Al, the big 5-0. And Al, of course, he's the host, the award-winning host of Yes, We Are Open, which just dropped all the episodes from season 8. And if you want inspiring stories from small business owners, Al went to Regina, Saskatchewan. Tom, how many times in your life do you think you've been to Regina, Saskatchewan?
Once.
Did you enjoy your experience in Regina, Saskatchewan?
I was only there for a couple of days. I was shooting, I think I was shooting a documentary for sports. I've been to Saskatoon, been to Regina, been to Swift Current, Prince Albert, I think. Yeah.
Well, Regina's where the Rough Riders play.
Indeed. Yeah.
Right.
No, I used to, that's another thing I did. Again, talking about.
Well, we're looking back here. This is the X interview.
It's like, even though I worked at CBC for 44 years, I had multiple careers at the CBC. I did so many different things. I did Hockey Night in Canada games. I did Blue Jays baseball. I did CFL and CBC. I did Marketplace, and I did The Current, As It Happens, and Cross Country Checkup. And I did, the only thing I never did was the National. Never hosted the National, but other than that, I did everything else. And there's no broadcaster in North America I could have done that with. Nobody. There are very few in the world, but certainly not in North America. So even though I worked at the CBC for 44 years, I never had the same career for 44 years. And
you did a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But how come I don't remember you? When were you doing Blue Jays baseball?
So in 1990, I moved here from Montreal in 1994, my wife and I, and I was doing some freelancing kind of with CBC Sports at that point. I'd been on the Canada Games in Kamloops in 93, and I moved to, and I did a couple of other sports specials that winter. So we moved here in June of 94. And they reached out and asked me if I would host a couple of Blue Jays games, because back when we had the rights, they had kind of a host role, a bit like Ron McLean and Brian had on different broadcasts, right? Ron doing, say, hockey, and Brian doing football. So I was asked to come in and do that, and it was the Tigers. It was a Friday and Saturday. The first game, by the way, so the first game I ever saw at the Dome, I hosted. Because I never seen one at the Dome prior to moving to Toronto. So I hosted the telecast with Brian and the late John Cerruti. He was a wonderful guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I watched a lot of Blue Jays baseball with John Cerruti doing color.
Yeah. So I was the host basically for, the Friday and the Saturday games against the Tigers. So I did that role. I was, they brought me in and went to the production meetings. They gave me an idea of what my role was. I'd watched some Blue Jays baseball, obviously, on CBC before. So, and Brian was great. Like, he pulled me aside before the game and he sort of said, he talked a bit about how it rolls and what the job is. And he said, you're going to be great and all that kind of thing. And he came up to me afterwards and congratulated me, very kind. And so then I did the Saturday game. And of course, about a month later, they went on strike and the season ended. But so that was my Blue Jays baseball experience. But I did a few CFL games, and I did some Hockey Night in Canada playoff series and a couple of regular season games as well. So, yeah.
What a life, right? It's a wonderful life.
Pretty good.
You can borrow that.
Sure.
Okay. So, by the way, I recently revisited a game I watched live at the Dome. I was at the Dome for the final game. I think it was 98 season, but the final Jays game of 98 season. And young Roy Halladay, because this is 98, was on the mound. And he took a 8 2/3, so 8.2.
I remember this. Vaguely, yeah.
And I'm watching it because I was there live, but I was going to talk to Keegan Matheson about this because it's the closest I've ever come to witnessing a no-hitter. And we were going to have a long chat about Dave Stieb, who still has the only no-hitter in Blue Jays franchise history here. So Roy Halladay, Bobby Higginson hits a home run and ends this no-no with 2 outs in the 9th. And Brian Williams was calling that game.
Okay.
And the fun fact I dropped on Keegan, because I think it's wild, is in the bullpen, there's a guy who's making a comeback as a reliever for the Blue Jays. He's in the bullpen, and he ends up catching the ball that's hit into the bullpen. So with the home run ball by Bobby Higginson that broke up the no-hitter that Roy Halladay was pitching there in the late 90s. Who do you think caught that ball making a comeback as a reliever for the Toronto Blue Jays?
1998.
Yeah.
I'll just throw a name out, Jim Clancy.
No, he would been. I think he'd be way too old. I think.
Okay,
but yeah. But no bad guesses on this program. Dave Steeb.
No,
because Dave Steeb made a comeback.
Come on.
Yeah, he had this next chapter as a reliever.
That sounds sort of familiar, but yeah.
But
that's amazing. Wow.
And he ends up with the ball.
Yeah.
And by the way, there is an episode coming up. I think it's in early July, where I have two gentlemen from the Today in Dave Steeb history account that you can see on X and Blue Sky. We're going to make the case for Dave Steeb to be in Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame.
You know what? I'm with you on that.
You got to tune into this one.
Look at his numbers on it. In those days. Yeah.
Yeah. Two things worked against Dave Steeb. Well, three things, but no, two. I'm going to say two. One is he was on a lot of bad Blue Jays teams that didn't win a lot of games, so he didn't get a lot of wins.
Nope.
The Hall of Fame guys like to see 20 wins and all that crap back then. Secondly, Dave Steeb was to people like you covering the team, a little bit of a jerk.
So I didn't cover the Jays, but I certainly know people who did, who would agree with you that he was not a very nice person.
Well, I co-hosted a show with Mark Hebscher for 5 years, and I got lots of stories.
Yeah. So, Steve Carlton didn't even talk to reporters, and he got in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Ted Williams.
He played in America.
Yeah, and the other thing was that I think the third thing is he played in Toronto.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
that's the third
that was certainly a mitigating factor for Steve. But the wins is the single biggest thing holding him back. His complete games, his ERA, strikeouts, all the rest of it, and the no hitter, all of that are Hall of Fame quality, but it's the fact he doesn't have the wins. So
right.
Yeah.
So we're gonna close with a little music, but I do need to shout out two more sponsors. One is Nick Iones, who hosts Building Toronto Skyline tomorrow morning. That's Friday morning. That's Friday the 13th. We'll be recording a couple of new episodes of Building Toronto Skyline. I urge you to subscribe and support Nick because Nick supports Toronto Mic'd. He stepped up to help fuel the real talk. And last but not least, recyclemyelectronics.ca. That's where you go, Tom, if you have old cables, old electronics, old devices.
I think I've used them. Actually.
Yeah, it's very good because you put in your postal code and they say drop it off here.
Yeah.
And then it's properly recycled so that the chemicals do not end up in our landfill. Tom, off the top of this program, we heard you singing as, what were you, 12? What were you back then?
Would have been, I think, just past my 13th birthday, I think. That was the last time we were on. It was on the third episode. So that was
that
April.
Before the voice changed?
Probably. Yeah. Well, I think I was singing alto at that point. I wasn't singing soprano anymore.
Okay. There's a famous Simpsons episode when young Homer is singing in the choir and Abe Simpson's like, that boy is going to make me rich or something. And then Homer's voice changes in the middle of the Christmas song. And then that was it for Homer's singing career. I'm just curious, when you're chilling out, because now you've been retired since March, like, what are you listening to? Like, what would be the type of music Tom Harrington would turn on when you wanted to hear some jams?
So my go-to, generally speaking, is jazz now, and that's old and new. It's everything from Oscar Peterson to Go-Go Penguin. That's a band from Manchester, England, and so I've got a really wide range of jazz on my playlist on my phone. On the rock side, I'm a bit of an iconoclast. I tend to go for older stuff, not super old, but it's 70s, 80s. I'm a Steely Dan fanatic. It's probably my favorite band, Talking Heads, and a band called XTC. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Yeah, of course. Dear God was a big one.
Huge, So those are kind of my go-to bands, but I don't listen to a lot of
Senses Working Overtime.
Tons.
Think of all the hits.
Peter Pumpkinhead. Yeah, there's tons. Those are my three kind of favorite bands.
Okay.
So, but in terms of, the main thing I play is a lot of jazz.
Okay, we're going out with a song that's a little older than the XTC you're listening to there, but.
I'm a cork on the ocean, floating over the raging sea. How deep is the ocean? How deep is the ocean? I lost my way. Hey, hey, hey.
Tom Harrington, what song am I playing here?
It's called Till I Die by the Beach Boys. It's from the album Surf's Up. It's one of the few songs, not few, but Brian Wilson wrote that song, wrote and arranged that song, just him, not all the other band members. And that I was too young to get into Pet Sounds at the time. This was 71. I heard it a few years later. I didn't have the record. I bought the cassette many years later. And this song in particular stays with me because Wilson was going through a lot in that period, psychologically and emotionally. He was a bit of a wreck, and this is it's kind of a dark song, actually. It's called Till I Die, but it's very haunting. It's very beautiful, and the use of harmonies and then singing it in unison in back and forth is really interesting. And so I posted that yesterday when he died, because it's one of the songs that came to me. People go to God Only Knows, which is fantastic. It's a masterpiece, but this is a really, to me, sort of kind of sums up the life of Brian Wilson. Kind of tortured, gifted, a bit like Mozart, kind of like the Mozart of the 20th century.
You wrote, "This meditative piece haunted me when I first heard it, and it still does."
Yep. The way he describes despair and sadness, and how it seems unrelenting, and how deep is the valley, how long will the wind blow, when will it end, kind of thing. It'll end when I die. It's pretty dark, I know, but it's very powerful, very moving. The first song that came to mind when I heard the news yesterday.
We lost a musical genius.
Absolutely. Yep.
And CBC has lost a genius as well.
No.
Do you know Tom Harrington has retired? Okay. So you've been retired since March now.
Yep.
That's over a couple of months now. How's it going so far?
Excellent. I don't miss it a bit, honest to God. But
you look relaxed. You look good. I'm like, oh, retirement is suiting Tom.
Yeah, no, it really does. I'm busy with my grandson, and I'm having lunch with friends that I never get to do, and I'm going out in the evening doing things that I would never gotten to do, and I get to do things with you. So.
Well, when you said you and Donovan were going to have a lunch or something at some point, he'll take you to Via Allegro, which is by Sherway Gardens, and they have this massive wine cellar there. It's unbelievable what they've got going on there. Just make sure that's where he takes you, okay? Because that's where he takes people he likes.
Okay.
I'm just letting you. That's a pro tip for you. But I liked this very much, and I really appreciate you taking some time, dropping by in your retirement, and to tell us why you left the CBC, reflect on your 44 years, and enjoy retirement, man. You deserve it.
Thanks, Mike. Good to talk to you as always.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,710th show. 1710. So your two numbers are 896 and 1710.
Sounds like if you double the 896, we get to 1710.
That math works. Okay. You're blowing my mind. You're blowing my mind over here. My goodness gracious. Go to torontomike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Tom's going to do that and find the clip of me on CNN, and then he's going to review me. How did I do during my CNN appearances? Stay tuned to find out. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. Tom's got his beer. He's allowed to take everything now. He's not at CBC anymore. Palma Pasta, it's in my freezer. Toronto Maple Leafs Baseball, you've got your book right there. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Building Toronto's Skyline. Moneris and Ridley Funeral Home, you have your measuring tape. Everybody, there's a episode tomorrow with FOTM Sky Wallace. She's got new music. We have a lot to discuss. I love Sky Wallace. That's tomorrow. See you all then.